All right, everyone. Today, what I want to talk about is the statist dilemma. Now, first of all, what is a statist? A statist is somebody who thinks a government is necessary and or has authority. So here's the problem. Here's the questions I have that it doesn't make sense to me. So in law, there's only two schools of law. There's contract law and tort law. So what is tort law? Tort law is anything that's not doesn't require a contract. So, for example, the right to life, right? You don't have to have a contract with every person on the planet to not kill you. So, so tort law is if you violate someone's rights, that falls under tort law. The other law is contract law, and that covers all contracts. So those are only two schools of law. Now, the Declaration of Independence states governments derive their quote unquote just authority from the consent of the governed. So the question then becomes, well, what constitutes consent in law? Because it only matters what can be enforced in a court. So so it has to fall under either, tort law or contract law. So the only one I can see that it would fall under would be contract law. There would have to be a contract to give somebody the authority to dictate what you can do with your life. That would be the burden of evidence would be that there's a contract. That's that in law there that would be the only evidence of consent would be a contract. It can't fall under tort. Now, why not? This might be a little confusing. So the thing is, um, for consent. Now you'll ask a lot. You have conversations with a lot of statists. Well, if you don't leave, if you don't move, that's consent. But there's no case law that I know of that would support that claim. And what do I mean by that? The government, like, let's take the government of the United States, for example. Its claim to fame is the Constitution, okay? Well, what is the Constitution? The Constitution is a document written up by some guys back in the day. That's it. So if your claim is that if you don't move, you're subject to the Constitution, well, anybody can write a Constitution. It's just a document with some words on it and some claims, and that's it. And they signed it as witnesses. They didn't even sign it as contracts. So, you know, if that's the claim that all you have to do is not move, then anybody could write a constitution and then have their neighbors subject to them. And if they don't obey whatever you dictate to them, you should be able to take them to court and have the courts enforce your constitution on them. Now, people will say, well, the Constitution was ratified by the 13 colonies. Well, where did they get their authority to even ratify something? I haven't looked into it, but they either got it from England. They were either established by England or uh, the company back then that was populating the colonies. Or they did the exact same thing and just wrote up a constitution and then created their government via that, but didn't actually have any evidence of consent. People may point out a social contract. Well, not again, but the problem with the social contract idea is a contract in legalese has specific elements that have to be met for it to be considered a contract. And there is no court on the planet that has ever upheld that the social contract is an actual contract. But feel free to prove me wrong. You just have to find one court case. But I can guarantee you it doesn't exist. No one's ever upheld that there's a social contract because it doesn't meet the elements of a contract. And people will change it to, well, it's a social construct. Well, that's not legally enforceable either. So the problem I have with any government on the planet is that if you don't agree they need consent of the governed to have authority, well then again, if you go into a court, that means if you don't need consent to be a government, that means anybody could just become a government and the court should be able to enforce their quote unquote laws dictates or whatever on whoever, and it should be justified. So that's my conundrum with the idea of government is I don't see how it has any kind of authority to do anything that they do. It just I don't see how they have authority. Um, if you disagree with me, please note in the comments, and I'd love to have a conversation with you. I'm always open to having my mind changed, but I just don't see how they have any authority.